social sustainability agent with the local Scampy County Extension Office. I want to thank all of you for coming out here tonight and taking the time to participate. Hopefully it'll be a very productive evening and hopefully get some of your questions answered. I'm going to hand it over now to Mayor Pensacola, Mr. Mike Wiggins, for a welcome. Thank you.
Thank you much, Terry. And thank everybody for being here tonight. We all know we are in an environmental and economic crisis in Pensacola. And it was all brought home today when we got our results and our pictures from the beach. The beaches are closed, you can't swim, the oil is all over the place, and it's a terrible situation. Which makes us thankful for what Carrie is doing to put this program together that is going to teach us about human health and environmental response. And I think we're all going to learn. Because quite frankly, in my opinion, a lot of us are confused because we can't get the answers we want, frustrated because we're not sure what to do to help, and angry because our way of life is threatened. And so I want to thank Carrie, who has done an unbelievable job, not only in this crisis, but for years in the area of horticulture and stormwater and xeriscaping and organic gardening. I want to give her a big hand for putting this together. Here she is. So once again, I want to thank all of y'all for coming. I am an optimist by trade. We're going to get through this. We're going to get to the other side of this, but it is going to take work. It's going to take money. It's going to take local control. It's going to take citizen involvement. And I think all of us are ready to pitch in and make that happen. So thanks for all you're doing. Thanks for being here. Y'all are what makes Pensacola great, and I thank you. And as your mayor, I double thank you during this crisis. Thank you very much.
Mayor Wiggins, thank you, and thank the City of Pensacola for donating this facility for us to use tonight. It's a beautiful place that we have now because of Hurricane Ivan, right? It's rebirth, so good things can't come out of disaster. The panels tonight, the first one will be human health and effects from the oil spill. We have local people, excuse me. We wanted to have local people who live here, who are raising their families here, who understand what's going on and can talk to you, that you can get back in touch with if you need to. All of the information is in the bios and the agendas that you received tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to have them come up now. I'll give you just a brief introduction. Dr. David Josephs, the clinical director for Lakeview Center. If you'll come on up to the panel. Grab your tag there and stick in front of you. Jeanette Garrett, Program Director for Lakeview Center. Dr. John Lanza with the Scampy County Health Department. Tim Simmons with DEP Ambient Air Quality. And Bill Mahan with Franklin County Extension and Sea Grant. IFAS Extension, our role is to bring research-based information out to the community, and so we wanted to have a forum that would be based on fact and not a lot of the rumors that are floating around, and hopefully we can give that information to you. There are extensions partnership between the University of Florida and your local county. There are a lot of agents who helped put this together tonight. Andrew Dillard with Sea Grant in my office, Christopher Lindy with Sarah County Extension, Brooke Seri with Okaloosa County. I think we have any other agents, but we do have Dr. Springer with the University of Florida here. Chris and Brooke and Andrew will be here handing out numbers. When it's time for questions, I ask you to raise your hand. They'll bring you a number card, and that's how we'll do this to kind of keep everything moving smoothly. If you're number one, you'll come up to the podium. After they're done, number two will come, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't want to ask a question, you can write it down, hand it back to one of these folks, and we'll read it for you so we can get that information passed along. Let Andrew say a short word.
I was just going to say, yeah. Also, if you have a question that is not answered, we will be trying to write those down. But we also have these comment cards or question cards. You can write your question down on there. We will get you an answer. We will find the best possible answer out there, and we will get back to you. So make sure you get an answer, or you get your comment question down on this piece of paper so that we can get back to you that way.
Thanks. All right, I'm going to give each of the panelists just a couple minutes to give us your background, what your area of expertise is. As you see, a lot of our topics are listed on the top left section of the agenda tonight, but we'll start with Jeanette Garrett from Lakeview. If you'll go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your response to the oil spill and how it's affected your practice. And just pass that microphone down as you go.
Hello, my name is Jeanette Garrett. I am a licensed mental health counselor at Lakeview Center. Can you hear me now? Is it on?
It's on.
Yeah. Okay, I'm a licensed mental health counselor at Lakeview Center. I'm the director of the Adult Outpatient Counseling Program, and I've been with Lakeview Center for roughly 13 years. We provide substance abuse and mental health counseling to adults and children within Lakeview Center. Within my program, it's 18 on up, and we provide any kind of services that someone may need, individual, group counseling.
Good evening. I'm David Josephs, Lakeview's clinical director. I've been here in Pensacola since the time of Opal and Aaron. Most of us in this community, with Opal, Aaron, and I guess Ivan, and now the oil spill, we think of, seemingly, thinking of time in terms of tragedy right now, and certainly this is a tragedy for our community. As the clinical director at Lakeview Center, one of our issues is how to help heal the community, how to provide services for the community, and I'll be talking to some of those things that we'll be doing and maybe some suggestions that we all can do to kind of stay glued together a little bit.
Hi, I'm John Lanz. I'm the director of the Escambia County Health Department. I'm a Florida Department of Health employee also, and I've lived here for 20 years. The first 3 years I was a pediatric resident. Closer? Pediatric resident at Sacred Heart Hospital, and the last 17 years I've worked at the Escambia County Health Department. And been through Opal, Aaron, Dennis, George, Ivan, you name it. The health department's been around since 1821, providing health care and health care prevention services for our residents here. And this is a particularly difficult issue here. The Department of Health is essentially a consultant at the state level to the DEP with the various issues that they're dealing with. Locally, however, we work very closely with emergency management, where I was at the Emergency Operations Center today when we started seeing the oil coming in, and then we had to put out the health advisories that you've probably all seen on the news, and we can go into more detail on that subsequently.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Simmons. I'm with the Florida DEP Ambient Monitoring Section. I'm the air monitoring supervisor. I've been there for a lot of years now. I can tell you how many. In response to the oil spill, we have been working with EPA mainly and helping them with some specific air monitoring sites. And we also have done a little bit on our own, but most of it's been with EPA. They're doing the lion's share of this right now. We have been working with them. We started air monitoring for compounds related to the oil spill around the middle of May, and we'll be going for quite a while, I'm sure.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Mann, and I've been a Florida Sea Grant agent since 1989, although I started out on the east coast of Brevard County, but I've been in the Panhandle region since '93 and have worked closely with commercial seafood harvesters and processors the whole time. And as far as the oil spill, I've been working closely with our Emergency Operations Center in Franklin County, along with our county commissioners. And a few weeks back, I was sent off for some special training on detecting the taint of oil in seafood products. And so I'm a potential screener if we ever start seeing tainted seafood coming in at the commercial level.
All right, thank you, panelists. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Get the attention of our facilitators, and they will hand you your card, and we'll start from there. Keep in mind, folks, that this program is being run live on AM 1620, so keep your language in check. It's also being videotaped by WSRE, and will hopefully be available via the internet to view later this week. Sure, you can have 2 questions. We are going to try and stay within our time frame as much as we can. So we've got just under an hour for this panel.
Good evening. I guess my question would be for Mr. Simmons. One of the folks that I work with has asked what, if any, may be the effects of or may there be a toxic rain impact out of this spill. And I guess my second question directly related to that is, all this stuff that's evaporating, all these toxic elements that are evaporating, where are they going and what are they doing?
Okay. I do not believe that there will be any sort of a toxic rain like you would, you're probably speaking of something like acid rain. No, these are, the compounds that are associated with an event like this, or they are organic compounds, and we're monitoring for what are known as VOCs. So forgive me for a minute, that's volatile organic compounds. And these things are associated with the evaporation process, which of course this time of year you're going to get quite a bit of that with the heat. With regard to health aspects, I'm afraid I really can't speak to that. Dr. Lanza probably could, but I can refer you to some information on the internet if you would like that. The easiest, best way to do it, we all know that sometimes the internet's not that user-friendly, but if you'll just go to dep.state.fl.us, that's the home page. You'll see a very large icon which says Deepwater Response, Deepwater Horizon Response. If you'll click on that, okay, it will take you to that home page, and over on the right-hand side, under the quick links, there's a link that's entitled Air Monitoring. That will take you to our data. It will also give you a link to the EPA data. It also has some of the, I think it has some answers for you that I don't. Dr. Lance, would you like to speak?
The question is specifically, what was your question?
Actually, I think he answered the bulk of the question. Can we expect anything related to or similar to toxic rain? I get the answer is essentially no. And then to find out more about monitoring air quality, we can get all the information on the website that he cited. So
all the air monitoring information that I've seen is below detectable levels, significant levels so far. So they're not monitored. If you can't detect it, then it's below federal standards for organics.
I'm good.
On the tables, you'll see.
On the tables of data, you'll see some entries that say ND, and that stands for not detectable. The analytical method that's employed just can't get that low. There are, you do see some real numbers in there, however, but as Dr. Lanza said, we have not found any concentrations yet that alarm us. But I can tell you the samples are being taken every day. They are being taken at one of our normal air monitoring sites, or established air monitoring sites. One is on board Pensacola NAS. One is at Fort Walton Beach, at one of our monitoring sites in Fort Walton Beach. The other one is at another one of our monitoring sites in St. Andrews State Park over in Bay County.
But I can say this, there are those chemically sensitive individuals out there who are normally chemically sensitive to pesticides and whatever, who can be sensitive to what minimal chemicals that could be in the air. And in fact, out of 380 or so calls to Poison Control Center and other emergency departments, those sort of things, 75 to 80% of those calls have been related to having difficulty breathing, congested, or something like that. So there are individuals out there who are potentially chemically sensitive to what's in the air. Of course, that could be pollen, it could be a lot of other things this time of the year. And of course, in our press release that we put out today, we've been putting out releases for 6 weeks to 2 months now, odors in the air. Those individuals who are sensitive to whatever's out there. I mean, I went out 6 or 7 weeks ago and I could smell it from the health department out on Fairfield. It didn't bother me physically, but I knew something was going on. And that's when we first put out the press release. So if you are chemically sensitive, it does cause you a problem with breathing or you just don't feel right. Please go inside to an air-conditioned space. Call your physician and get some advice as to what to do. But obviously, if none of that works, you need to get out of the area. And that's clearly stated in all of our press releases that we sent out from the health department.
Good evening. My name is Michael Allen from Pensacola, and I think I speak for everyone when I thank you for being here. I think it's important for you to be engaged with the community during this crisis. My question is also for Mr. Simmons of DEP. I happen to be on the EPA site looking at the readings for some of the data that you're collecting in your air samples. One of the things that you collect for is hydrogen sulfide. I wish that you'd speak a little bit about hydrogen sulfide and whether it degrades between here and spill, and whether at low levels it can have an effect.
Okay, thank you. Hydrogen sulfide, most of you have smelled it whether you know it or not. It's called rotten egg gas. Very, very offensive odor, obviously. Most people, as it turns out, can smell hydrogen sulfide and other reduced forms of inorganic sulfur, things like carbon disulfide, the mercaptans in very, very low concentrations. At those extremely low concentrations, they are not a problem. However, hydrogen sulfide in high enough concentrations, it can be a problem. It is toxic in high enough concentrations if you're exposed to it long enough. Right off the top of my head, I can't give you those numbers. I do not believe, and I may be wrong about this, because I'm not familiar with the entire composition that's coming out of this geological formation that well is tapped into. Some of those formations do contain hydrogen sulfide. This, as far as I know, is sweet, has been classified as sweet crude. I think we've all heard that term. I'm familiar enough to know that what sweet means is that there is no H2S in it. I think. I'm not positive about that. At atmospheric conditions, at ambient conditions like today, H2S will be oxidized. Some of it will be oxidized by the oxygen in the atmosphere to SO and to SO2. That's a slow process. It doesn't happen immediately, but it does occur over time. I'm not familiar with the data that EPA has out there on H2S. I apologize for that, but I don't know what they've been finding, if they've been finding anything.
Hello. I had two questions, but I was told that my wildlife question I should save for the second hour. So I'm just going to ask this one question. I've been out of town for 2 weeks and tried to keep up with the news about spill while I was gone. I heard something, and I saw something today on a YouTube video that was very alarming, and you know what? That was the passion question. That was my second question. It's about sea turtles being burned alive. But I'm going to say that for the second hand. The question I want to address you folks and ask is, why are we still allowing the dispersants to be used when, one, it appears that BP is using them just for cosmetics, and when several weeks ago the EPA sort of requested or ordered them to discontinue particular dispersants they were using, and the EPA responded the next day by saying no. Well, 2 weeks ago, before I left to go out of town, public television had an interview with Cousteau, the soul reigning son of Jacques Cousteau. And they did about a 7-minute interview, and I highly recommend. It's the clearest thing I've seen about this yet. They had gone on a dive, and he has a little bit of video of the plume down 3,000 feet that the dispersant is creating, right about the time when BP was saying that there was no plume. But interestingly enough, Cousteau said he spent most of his time on the fact, his expertise was that the use of the dispersants for whatever reason was a mistake, not the way to go. He also has a site called Ocean Futures Society, and I think he's been on a few other, nobody's picking him up to interview him, but I'd like to see Obama meet with Cousteau. Cousteau said if we'd left it on the surface, it would have been easier to collect. Now that it's been dispersed, it's in the food chain, and it's just so much. I mean, and so I'd like to get you guys' opinion on why somebody's not running with the ball and saying, let's quit using this. Thank you.
I saw that myself. It was very good. And I can say I have the same questions. I wish I had an answer for you. I wish I had an answer to mine. But I do not know what EPA was up to with that. My expertise is strictly in the air portion, but I don't know what. I'm not sure right now what EPA is using out there, or is allowing them to use, if they're allowing them to use anything right now. Someone may know the answer. Do you know, Carrie?
Everything I've heard is the corrected dispersants. There's 2 versions, there's I think 9500 and something else, but I'm not, other than that, I'm not a dispersant expert either. Dr. Lanza, do you know what you think? Can you address that? Some of our environmental folks may be able to address that as well. I know dispersants has been a real good question, and everybody's mind. So we'll get that information to you if you want to serve you.
He's writing it down right now.
Okay, you're going to write it down, we'll get that information to you, and we'll get some of this information up on our website and some of the county's websites as well. Frequently asked questions, because I know that is one of them. All right. Question 5? 6. 6.
Yes, I have a specific question. What is being monitored in the Gulf waters? And what type of reaction will people have if they come in contact with this?
I'll let Mr. Simmons talk about what's being monitored.
I don't know what's going on with the water. We don't have anybody here.
I do know that UWF and Dr. Snyder perhaps could address the monitoring of the water that's being done.
Yeah.
And DEP is, I've been told, doing deep water monitoring also, as well as air monitoring. What the short-term effects are, of course, we don't advise in the swimming areas that we put the advisory up today, people going into the water. The effects of oil on the body, skin effects would be irritation for sure. It could be absorbed via the nose, via the mouth into the stomach. You definitely don't want to do that, cause vomiting, diarrhea. that's why we put the advisories up in Pensacola Beach and Johnson Beach today, because of the fact there's so many tar balls and moose-like material that you can't possibly go in the water without contacting it. So we do not advise people going into the water from dune crossover 23 just to the west of Portofino all the way to the gate of Johnson Beach over Perdido Key.
So as the tar balls recede, then I'm assuming there's some monitoring of the water to see if there's any residual effect before permission given to go into the water. But I guess that's the next panel. You can handle that, or can you handle that question?
Well, right now, our basis for rescinding, as we just did for Perdido Key, is we don't see sheen, we don't see slick, we don't see significant amounts of tar balls and or moose-like material such that you could go in the water without inadvertently touching it. That's our decision for rescinding.
So it's a visual.
It's a visual,
rather
right?
than
Exactly.
measuring any chemical or anything that's in there.
No, it's a visual. That's what our concept of operation is.
Excuse me.
And of course that is an evolving process, but that's what we're working with right now.
Okay.
Next question, Seth?
Hi, and I do express my appreciation for you all being willing to come out tonight and for all of us to be able to be here and ask some of these questions. I think my question really is for Mr. Mann, and it relates to seafood. We've just come from the Orr House, having a very nice evening, something to snack on before we came over here. And what I want to know is what monitoring is actually going on with current seafood, who is conducting that, and from the consumer's perspective, what questions should we be asking our seafood providers if we go to Maria's or Joe Patty's, or from our restaurateurs?
Okay. Well, as far as the monitoring question, there are a number of agencies that are actually involved, and that depends on what, say, the processing plant is producing. So you'll have regulatory agencies like the Department of Agriculture at the state level looking into it. Small business regulation also might be involved. At the federal level, Food and Drug Administration, NOAA Fisheries are all involved. And again, a lot has to do with what is actually produced at the plant. There are a number of plants that actually hire the NOAA inspectors to be there anytime they're processing. It's a for-fee service, but it's voluntary. And the NOAA inspectors are there. In fact, when I had my training the other week, the lead instructors were from NOAA and FDA. So they're the ones who are routinely out there. But what is going on now is, of course, the fishermen themselves are the first line of defense. And they sure don't want to bring in anything that looks a little odd to them or has any kind of oil smell, because all the plants are required to have what they call HACCP plans, which is Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. And that identifies all the potential spots in the processing that could cause, say, public health issues. And FDA right now is moving forward with requiring sort of the oil screening to be an automatic part of all the HACCP plans for seafood producers. So as far as questions to ask, say, at the restaurant level, I would just ask them if they've gotten their seafood from a certified dealer, which they all should. And if they're not, of course, that's illegal. But if it is coming through the normal seafood processing chains, there are inspections in place. They have stepped up the inspections. They've brought in some additional inspectors from outside the area. And they're also training folks like myself to be screeners if they ever think we're needed, just to add some extra, sensory evaluations out there. And, that answer your question? Well,
I have a question from the audience. Once a level of containment has been determined to be dangerous, what agencies will be advised, and will there be any action taken other than telling people to avoid the water and beaches and seafood?
I'll just say a quick word on seafood. From the seafood end, if there's a problem with oil taint in a fisheries, NOAA and probably at the state level, Florida Fish and Game will close that fisheries to make sure that contaminated product doesn't even show up at the docks. There was a question earlier about monitoring. I know DAX is out there monitoring or have collected pre-oil spill shellfish samples and water samples. I know DEP in a lot of areas is also taking sediment and water samples, so there's a lot of pre-spill samples that have already been collected, and until the environment gets back to at least those normal background conditions, my guess is they wouldn't be reopening any kind of fisheries once it's closed. I mean, they're already taking precautionary closures as far as fishing areas, but they have not closed a total fishery. And so what they have been doing is looking at where the oil is dispersed and putting a 5-mile buffer zone outside of that to have added protection. And that's, if you followed it online, sort of the changing NOAA fisheries closure in the Gulf of Mexico. And I guess I heard a report earlier, they've changed that area 17 times since the spill began, so they're continually monitoring it and shifting the closure as far as recreational and commercial fishing allowance.
The information that the Department of Health is getting air and water is going to our toxicologists in Tallahassee. I've been told that the various agency toxicologists are formed an interagency task force so that they're talking with each other. I think they're going across state lines too, so that the evaluations that they come down with based on the information that's being fed to them regarding air and water are meet the level of the science that is available out there. And I, by email, have discussions with our Florida Department of Health toxicologists, and they are looking at the data along with the other toxicologists, and so far the levels are not meeting any levels that we're aware of that would be of human health significance in the water or the air right now. Like I said, that's being constantly evaluated.
Another question from the audience. Are we still shrimping in Pensacola Bay, and if so, when will the bay be closed?
I don't think they have closed the bay for shrimping at the moment, but we will check and make sure that if somebody wants to leave their contact information on there. Okay, good. So we will get an answer to that question. At the moment, I believe the bay is open to shrimping. The bay waters have been declared open for regular fishing, recreational fishing at the moment, and it's still safe to fish there. But they will close it if they see a significant oil coming in through the pass and getting to that point.
And I'll just add there have been some offshore closures for fishing or shrimping and fishing in general. So I have not heard of any inshore shrimp closures yet.
Got a question ready?
I guess we're all kind of Greek to this, and you guys probably have never dealt with anything like this. not even in the doctorate papers, I guess. But having dealt with the Superfund site right here for 30 years, EPA has done gross negligence.
Can't hear you. Get up to the microphone.
I'm saying, having done with the Superfund here in Pensacola, the EPA has been gross negligent. 30 years, nothing accomplished. As a citizen, I'm asking you people, our leaders, how can we help you motivate the EPA, the federal government, to get you more help? I know Dr. Lonzo's short-handed, and I'm sure everybody's going through budget cuts. But we need to get them working. This is our Katrina, and it's going to last generations. What can we do?
Senator Nelson has been very active in our community over the past 10 or 11 years in working with the EPA Superfund sites, and has been very helpful in getting funding at UWF to do studies and show the issues that are out there. You know, just speaking as a citizen, if you talk to your federal representatives, that's the way to do things. Well, if enough people talk to them, as you're asking.
I'm not afraid to them, but what can we do to help y'all other than that? Have they thrown money at you like you need it?
Not yet.
Well, no, this is the real McCoy. We need the help.
We have put in requests for various studies and ways of doing things to help us in our local activities here. I mean, we work through our process up to the state, and the state, you know, goes to the feds.
But it's not getting the job done.
Well, it's a slow process, but you know, the more people that communicate with their the federal representatives, the better it's going to be. I really can't say anything more than that.
Well, I'm just saying, as public officials, make a cry to us, go to the networks, and say we need more help. What I'm saying is, I've dealt with the Superfund site, and it's like nothing's happened. What is the level of toxicity with this oil? How dangerous is it? Do we know?
Well, if you're in the water, you don't want to do that. Definitely.
What if you breathe it?
I was just talking about that. If you're chemically sensitive to that, then that can be a problem. And I described what it is that you need to do. What the long-term effects of that are, I don't know. And that's where studies could be done along those lines. What are the long-term effects? And I'm really interested in what are the psychological long-term effects. Is this a PTSD issue? That's what I'm really interested in, because we're getting questions sent to us through Emergency Operations Center, asking us to put out press releases on depression, and people who are at the beach, you watch on Channel 3, you watch on CNN, people just break down at the beach when they see what's happening to our beaches. And I'm a pediatrician, I am not a psychologist, so I would like for Lakeview someone to ask a question to Lakeview about what can be done along those lines.
My last question, and I'll leave you with this one. What about the chemicals that are coming in the crude? Is there benzene in crude oil?
Yeah, there are about 300 or 400 different chemicals in the oil, and yes, benzene is a problem. Most of them have been burned off with the ultraviolet radiation. Of course, these plumes that are under the sea, I mean, we don't really know what that's about. Now, you know, I'm just hearing us third and fourth hand. I am not a petroleum engineer.
Well, like the lady asked
earlier,
at what level will you consider an evacuation? That's my point of my whole question.
I don't think we're anywhere close to that right now. They're not doing that in Louisiana.
That's good.
Like this with the Exxon Valdez. One of the lessons learned from the Exxon Valdez event is that, you know, those of us who've been through Ivan, I got my house washed out onto me in Ivan, those of us who've been through Opal and Aaron, you know, the hurricanes, when they come, maybe not so much anymore, but there's always kind of a sense of excitement almost until they come. There is no sense of excitement about this oil. There is a sense of trepidation, fear, anger. The lessons learned from the Exxon Valdez spill for us as a community is that we can kind of deal with an act of God. It's real tough for us to deal with an act of us. What happened in those communities is that the communities tended to start pulling themselves apart. People fighting against one another. The opportunity for our panel and panels to come and us as a citizenry is what can we do? I think getting in touch with our political representatives, doing the things so that we get the fiscal as well as other aids that we need is important. As a psychologist, one of the things I'll tell us all is we need to be very, very careful with this amount of anger we're all feeling. Don't know about you, but I'm a little pissed off. Okay? Anger is a good, healthy emotion. If we start directing it at one another, if we start directing it at things that are not productive, all of this energy that we have stored up is lost. These panels, these experts that we have over here, the opportunity is get the political help, the Cousteaus, the people who have information, bring them to bear, have our political leaders listen to that, and that we are focusing our anger in a directed way, not taking it out on ourselves, not taking it out on our children or our families. I don't know if Sarah wants to add anything.
And the other thing, to piggyback on the last thing he said, is to be a support for each other. Being able to listen and talk to each other, and when you see others with significant signs of distress, trying to reach out to them to see if they're in need of additional services.
This question from the audience, I believe, goes to you too. As many of us working with children in environmental education and children in our circle, how do we help them cope with this, especially when it's difficult to be hopeful as an adult?
I'm going to give this to Martha first.
I think education is very important at their level to just state the facts of what's going on and letting our children know what's going on. And it's okay to say to our children, we don't know what's going to happen if we really don't know what the effects are going to be. Being upfront and honest with your children and not also exaggerating what could potentially happen. Be real, and communication is very important.
And I would add for children as well as adults with traumas, this is a trauma. The reaction to trauma usually is we like to control stuff. We like to, people with PTSD, what people with PTSD do is we try to control the whole environment. For our children and for us is what are healthy controls we can do? What are things that are not necessarily distracting, but productive things you can have the kids do? Have them get involved maybe in things that they feel they're contributing to the cleanup of the environment. When we are involved, us as panelists coming in here, part of the good feeling is what we're participating. That is something I think as a community and even for our kids we can do.
Good evening. My name is Rita Eisnerl. I represent First Copper Health United Way. We're experiencing a pretty significant, just gradual, but daily increase in the anxiety level, the frustration of our callers. And my concern is that it does not appear at this stage that Unified Command has identified that a mental health coordinated effort is going to be launched. Is Lakeview taking any actions to develop that kind of unit?
Yes, we currently have an initiative to get out to the communities. One of the things that history has shown that works is
most of the folks who are affected by this are frankly not us necessarily in this room. It's the folks initially who are losing jobs, who fishermen who can't fish, charter boat captains who can't take people out. So we need to target our interventions initially at the people who are suffering most. Now, we will all be included in that group at some point in time, the longer this goes on, which is the reason for trying to get ahead of it. So the efforts are going to be to get out to the community, to provide some of these resources to the people in the areas most affected first.
Has there been any indication that Unified Command in Mobile will be adding mental health?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Any indication that the Unified Command in Mobile will be adding a mental health component?
I'm not aware of any unified effort from Mobile.
As I sort of alluded to at first, we ESFA, the Public Health and Medical, has been asked to provide bullets, so to speak, for the community. And I've asked Lakeview if you could help us tomorrow develop what those bullets would be so that we can send it out perhaps as a joint press release from Lakeview and the health department. It's not something the health department deals with. We don't deal with mental health issues, but Lakeview is our expert in town, and we would really appreciate, the SFA would definitely really appreciate Lakeview's assistance in helping our residents and the visitors who come here and see the disaster that's happening on our beaches right now.
Well, two people already answered my questions on children, but I'll just say, what about questions that children ask, like, why can't I go in the water, why can't I fish, why mommy or daddy aren't working, and those kind of things. You say, be honest with them.
I think once again, it's talking to our children about what the reality of what's going on. Explaining our tragedy as at their level, depending on what age level they're at, and working with them in instilling some kind of hope with them as well. When we, as parents, show that we're stressed or we may be reacting in an extreme way, they'll grab onto that and they'll work that way as well. So it's trying to remain calm and be very factual and trying to continue to instill hope.
My question is still to y'all. Mental health, have y'all accessed the Prince William Sound's
Yes, we have.
wealth of information that's out there? Do you have a plan for all the mental health other than Lakeview to pull people together to reach out?
Yes, that is the plan. One of the advantages of Lakeview Center, we have associations obviously in town. Lakeview's been part of the community since 1959. But yes, we're studying closely those information. Again, what comes from that is reaching out to the community, doing things in the community, targeting areas, not really expecting people who are experiencing crisis or difficulty to drive and come to a community mental health center. I frankly don't think that's going to happen. This will be an outreach, and if people do need additional services, then they can access us.
And what would be our actions to help pull these people? I see them every day. I talk to them. I get emails. You know, what are our actions as citizens to pull them together so we don't get divided?
I think for right now, folks are able to access the campus at Lakeview Center. In the upcoming weeks, we'll be putting information out in terms of where you can access these other areas, and we'll be working to adopt plans and the other folks in order to do that. There will be information on our website, so folks will know what to do. Also, I think it's very important during this time that we not get, as a community, caught up in some of the hysteria that can that is floating around, that's generated really to cause hysteria. We're about getting healthy. Your friends, my friends, are about getting healthy and helping to patch up this community, and that's what we want to provide some help to those folks who need it most.
Well, and that's the hysteria is what divides us all, and that's what we need help to how to stop this, because that's how they win. You know, it's to keep us all separated with different issues, and we need to come together, and I think we're all here to try to figure out how to do that.
Yes.
Thank you.
This will be our last question. If you have any other questions, I'll pass it on the clipboard for you to write down, and we'll get answers for you.
Good evening. My name is Susan McKinnon. I serve as the fleet captain at Pensacola Yacht Club, right next door. And I've got 3 questions. The first one is the water and air quality of Pensacola Bay at a safe level for adult and children's recreational sailing. I'm talking about not in the water activities, but on water activities.
We have no advisories for Pensacola Bay, is what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
There are no health advisories for Pensacola Bay.
Okay. My next question is, how often is the air and water quality on the bay monitored?
I can speak to you about the air. The air is monitored every day. Now, because of the compounds that we are analyzing for things like benzene, toluene, xylene, these samples are collected over a 24-hour period in canister. They have to be shipped back to a laboratory. It's fairly sophisticated analysis. So the turnaround time on this is approximately a week. Now, the samples are collected every day. They're shipped out the very next day. So EPA is moving as quickly as they can on this, and so are we with our site. But there is about a 1 hour lag time on that before the data shows up on the internet.
Okay.
But again, so far, we really haven't seen anything that causes us concern from a health standpoint. Not yet.
Okay. Now, I know that the water is monitored, and I know that it has been, you know, Bio Grande, Bio Chico. Do we monitor the water anywhere in the Sanders Beach vicinity?
I do not know. I don't have that information for me. Possibly. Carrie, do you know?
Commissioner Robinson actually was going to mention that, and I know Dr. Scott and Dr. Patterson would address that too.
Okay. Now, in talking about the website, to which website are you referring?
Again, I mentioned this a little earlier, but I still think that the easiest way to get to it is through our website, which is just dep.state.gov.us.
Okay.
And when you go there, that's the home page, you'll see a link to the Deepwater Horizon Response homepage. Okay, once you go to that, there's also a link to EPA's spill site, which has got air and water data on it.
Okay, and do you also communicate with the Escambia Disaster Response, the emails that they send out several times a day?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If y'all will give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you very much. If you have any additional questions that even pop up after, as you're hearing the next panel that you wish you'd ask these other folks, we have these kind of gold-colored question cards. Please fill one of those out and we'll get the answer to you. Our next panel will come up, but before that I want to ask Commissioner Grover Robinson to come say a word. He came out here tonight and wanted to thank you all and just tell you a little bit about Escambia County's response. Several of you asked about water quality sampling. Get some feedback. And DEP samples weekly. Escambia County is sampling 6 different locations in conjunction with the University of West Florida. There's a lot of water quality monitoring going on at this point. Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, and I understand, Robert's not going to be here. Do you have another speaker? Okay. But I did want to address some of the things that are going on there today. Obviously, we got hit pretty hard out on the beach, and again, the challenges that we have is it's next to impossible to keep it all for 36 miles of beaches. We're certainly trying as much as we can. The issue we're addressing is how quickly can we clean it up, and where can we keep it out to make sure those inland estuaries. I was just dealing with one right now. And we're still continuing to deal with things over Rules Speed. So those are things we're trying to be very careful on what we do to keep it out of our estuaries and with the resources we do have, because of the challenges. It comes in at night on the tide, and it is very difficult for us to prevent from hitting all 36 miles of beach. So it's a tough situation. We're definitely trying to keep these passes, trying to keep these inland waters clean. But towards that end, we are taking, there were some comments about the water quality. We are taking that very seriously. In fact, Escambia County is one of the only counties, I understand now from the gentleman who's going to come up from West Florida, that Okaloosa County is also doing testing. But Escambia County was clear early on that we wanted to do water quality testing, and we would release those findings and put those are open to the public when those come in. So absolutely, we are doing that, and we'll continue to do that to let you know what's with water quality. Now, these are only shore readings. We're not going out, and I think the gentleman's going to come to you. There are people that are going out further. But what we're doing is trying to take Gulf shore readings in what is water quality. We will continue to do that. I want that to be clear. And Escambia County is also one of the only places that's doing that and making sure that we have water quality samples taken. Essentially everything else, we're working as quickly as we can and as hard as we can. We don't have a lot of control of the situation. That sort of came out today when we weren't able to get the contractor out there as fast. We were very upset about it. We complained about it. We actually did have the admiral from Mobile, from the Coast Guard, come down and meet with us today. He met with us. He actually went out on the beach. He then made the decision, which we said all along, you got to get something out here and start cleaning it. So at least I think we're making progress and trying to develop that relationship. But I want to be very clear about something. We didn't create this oil spill, and we really don't have much authority in it, but we're working as hard as we can, and I know I see the city here as well, working to make sure that we protect everything, all the assets we have in the city and in the county, and in Santa Rosa County as well, from getting damage or public health situations. So to that end, we're going to keep working as hard as we can on this process. But I appreciate y'all's concerns, and if you have any questions, please always feel free to contact us. But thank y'all for your willingness to show up tonight.
Yeah. You were out on the beach. You say it got into Little Sabine Bay?
Sorry?
You all got into Little Sabine?
No, well, we had about a week ago when it came in. We had some issues with the way the booming plan was first set up. In fact, we actually in Escambia County developed a local action plan, which we said the boom would be a certain way. Again, the contractors and American Wisdom decided to do it a different way. It actually failed. They are now doing it like the way we told them. But throughout this process, we've continued to see that they come in here thinking they know more than us, but after a while, they figure out that we knew what we told them the first time. But we have to get through that exercise, and that's what we continue to do. We did have tar balls come in and make landfall on the northern shore of the beach. We did have some get in a little steam on that situation. They got in under the boom, and that's why we're now implementing a curtain system. In fact, I was just talking to the owners of the homeowners association with Feet Cove. They have put a turbidity curtain across the Feet Cove, and we're working with that same situation, do some things with the steam. We're continuing to work on those, look at all options available to us. But remember, if we want to get paid on these things, we have to go through the proper channels to get approval to put them in.
We can put them in there, but we don't know that we're going to get paid. And right now, the county's out $5 million. The run rate would be out $9 million by the end of July. We've been promised, we've been told several times we're going to get paid, but we're 60 days into this and we haven't got a check yet. So we feel, all of you at the end of the claims process, we feel your pain on that, absolutely. It's got to be a better process, and we just testified today over Tallahassee about that process, and so hopefully we're going to see some improvements come to that process.
I want to make a comment about what you just said about going through the proper channels. Obviously, that takes time that we don't have to go through that. And I just want to give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, Diane Sawyer, ABC, went down and did a video interview of the mayor and the fire chief of Magnolia Springs, Alabama. Now, the fire chief in Magnolia Springs got 1,000 people together in their community on the Magnolia River, and they blocked off, about a month ago, they blocked off the pass to Weeks Bay, which is on the eastern shore of Mobile Bay, goes into the Magnolia River. They blocked it off totally. It's a narrow pass. They blocked it off with 6 barges permanently and 4 rows of boom on the south and 4 rows of boom on the north. And this fire chief was a little fire plug. He was just a country boy, but he had the support of his community. And at the end of the clip, you can look it up, it's only about 4 minutes. The mayor said, he was a very humble man, and he said, we went ahead and did what we thought was right, and if we have made any mistakes by not going through the proper channels, we will apologize later. So I try to encourage you guys to do what you think is right. Nobody's going to come down here and punish you. They're not going to take those barges off that pass. They look foolish. But that was, go see that video. It's awesome.
We continue to do those things, and most of the stuff that that's why we're $5 million into the hole. We went out and we're proactive on putting stuff out there. So again, those are some of the challenges we run into. We only have so much money. That's one of the problems we're going to run into. But again, we have had challenges because of the navigable waterway and so forth. We're waiting to see how the new boom that's being put in the Alabama Pass works, and if it's successful, we hope to do something similar. But you know, there are challenges with the Pensacola Pass, the size of it, and the volume of water that comes through it. And so for those reasons, we've tried to schedule up the boom system that we have. But that's the best we can work with at this time, and we're trying to move that thing forward. But we have asked for those things, and we will continue to keep pressing forward on those issues. But I can tell you, they went and did a lot of things. The same thing happened today, happened 2 weeks ago at Gulf Shores and Orange Beach. They got the same thing, and we're going to continue to see this. A lot of it is created by currents and winds, which we do not control. Those are things that are not controlled by any human. And so we're just somewhat at the mercy of those things that come by, and try to be prepared as we can and move forward. But toward that end, we'll keep working on that. Thank you very much.
I think this is the environmental response. A lot of the questions on the chemicals and the water quality and wildlife, this is your opportunity. We have Mr. Ken Rice, who's the Director of Wildlife Response, Mobile Sector Deepwater Horizon Incident. You can, as I call your name, you can just head up to the stage. Dr. William Patterson from University of West Florida is a fisheries biologist. Dr. Richard Snyder with University of West Florida as well. We'll let you get started, Mr. Rice, and pass it down to the professors. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to talk with you. I've been involved in wildlife issues, environmental response work for about 30 years. My first spill was the Ixtoc oil spill that occurred in the early 70s along the Bay of Campeche, and went on for about 9 months. And since that time, I've been actively involved in spill response, majority of it along the Texas coast. I've also worked a lot in Louisiana, the Mississippi River spill recently, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Ivan, Bayou Perot. There's been a large number of spills. I was on their Region 4 strike team for spill response. But like they said, I retired recently. I'd hope to move and spend some time in the Mobile, Alabama area, and my last day was the 16th of April, and the thing blew on the 20th, and I've been going ever since. So anyway, I've got a passion for wildlife as well as a lot of you do, and I'm doing everything that I can to try and identify injury and go through the process of documenting this and trying to save what wildlife we can, oil birds and others, and go through the rehab process.
I'm Will Patterson. I'm on the faculty at the University of West Florida, and we do fish research in my laboratory. And we have long-term data sets on many of the commercially and recreationally important species, as well as other species that happen to be very important ecologically, but maybe there's not a directed fishery for them. And we have long-term data sets on reef fish communities in many areas off the coast here, as well as since April, we've been running as fast and hard as we can to collect data on natural and artificial reefs off the coast. In the case that oil present in the coastal zone, which now we're aware that it is, in the case of that, we had some before data to compare for impacts. So, unlike our colleague here, I have zero experience with oil. To this point, I'd rather not have ever had any experience with oil, as I'm sure all of you feel the same. But now that it's here, we do have data to try to assess some of the unfortunate ecological circumstances that may arise.
My name is Dick Snyder. I'm the director of a small environmental research group at the University of West Florida. We actually got our start in about 1991, right after Exxon Valdez, and we did some oil spill research then. But I can tell you that research, academic research, goes in fads. People lost interest in oil research after a few years after Exxon Valdez, and now there's an interest in oil again, unfortunately. When the spill happened, I saw that most of what was being done was to track oil visually. You get the maps on the internet, the tar balls washing up on the beach. All of this is visual tracking of oil. The one thing that I did not see being done was tracking of dispersed oil, dissolved oil in the water. We as a group decided that we had to start doing something, unfunded or funded. We set up 4 stations on Santa Rosa Island to collect water and sand on the beach to start looking for dissolved oil if it came in. Escambia County found out what we were doing, asked us to add 2 samples on Perdido Key, and said that they would help us, support us to do those 4 stations on Santa Rosa Island. So we're sampling in Escambia County, Santa Rosa County, and Okaloosa County has recently asked us to pick up 4 stations over there. So we were monitoring oil, dissolved oil in the water for the 3 counties along the beaches. We have had 1 hit with dissolved oil in the water on Perdido Key last Thursday, a very small amount dissolved in the water. So it is not necessarily going to come in at the same time as the tar balls. The tar balls are highly weathered oil. Most of the volatiles are gone, the benzene and toluene things we were talking about earlier, most of that stuff is gone. The weathered tar balls are relatively inert. They have less toxicity than raw crude oil, and they do not dissolve in the water very much. What we're concerned about is all the oil that has been dispersed and dissolved in the water. Where is it? Where is it going? It is not being well tracked. We have had research ships going out from all the universities around the Gulf Coast trying to find this dispersed oil in the deep water. We have hints of it from these research ships. There is plumes of it out there in the deep water, and we just don't know how far it's going, what concentrations it is, and where it's going to end up. Will and I were on a cruise last week offshore, and we were looking for dissolved oil on the shelf. Some preliminary data, but I can't tell you for certain that we found oil out there. But we are monitoring along the beach, and if it comes ashore, then we will find it and we will let the public know. One of the things you'll hear is that all the testing that's being done, there's about a week turnarounds. Most of the labs now, there's a 2-week turnaround on getting samples processed. We try to keep things very simple, very lean, and very fast. We're taking samples on Mondays and Thursdays and trying to get that data turned around in 24 hours to let the public know. We didn't do that on Monday and Tuesday, right? It didn't happen this week, but we're gonna take samples tomorrow, and we're gonna try to get that information out by tomorrow afternoon. I'm pretty confident that we can do that. We ran into a little bit of a glitch this week. So we're trying to get the data out as quickly as we can, trying to make it public, let people know if there is dissolved oil in the water. Everybody can see the tar balls, the tar pies. I call them tar pies. It looks like cow pies rather than balls, right? When it lands on the beach, it's like, well, yeah, dog poo or cow poo. It looks like pies. You can see that. You can avoid it. But what you can't see is what's dissolved in the water. And if that material, we know it's out there, if it comes into the coast and into the bathing beaches, we want to be able to pick it up and let people know that there's oil in the water.
This is a follow-on question to one that was asked for the initial panel. And the question at that time was, BP continues to insert, I guess, their dispersant at the wellhead, and controversy whether or not the nature of the dispersant is more helpful than harmful. But I guess I have one question that you can't answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and that is, at what point will we, whoever we is, the governing body, the deciding body, the biggest tank in the force, be able to scientifically tell BP that their use of this dispersal anywhere, but primarily at the wellhead, is causing either a larger spread of oil changed in formula, in chemical formula that now becomes hazardous in a different way, to the point where we can say, don't use your dispersant.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it, and maybe I'll pass it down to strategy. There are no good strategies for dealing with this. This is huge. This is unprecedented. The amounts out there, it's like an Exxon Valdez every week, right? It's an enormous amount. If you're looking at seagrass beds and coral reefs, people do not want to use dispersants. They want the oil to float over those habitats. If we're looking at marshlands, intertidal oyster reefs, places where floating oil will come in and literally smother, like the pictures you've seen, it's happening anyway over in Louisiana and Mississippi Delta. The use of dispersants will limit the amount of smothering oil that will land in the intertidal zone. The thing with dispersants is that it dissolves the oil in the water. It increases the immediate acute toxicity because the dispersants themselves are toxic. The oil is toxic. You put the two together and it's even more toxic. It increases the contact with biota. It increases what we call the bioavailability. That increases immediate toxicity. The other side of that, though, is that it also disperses it and allows bacteria to more rapidly break the oil down. Bacteria are going to clean this all up eventually for us. It's just a matter of how long that's going to be, and we just don't know how long that's going to take. Use of dispersants will help bacteria break this oil down faster. But it also increases that immediate toxicity and puts it all through the water column where we can't track it. So there are no good solutions here, right? There are trade-offs on all of this. And you know, EPA was, you know, I don't know, the way that is my understanding, BP was supposed to test the use of dispersants under EPA supervision. EPA was supposed to say yes or no, and apparently they said yes because BP went ahead to use them. And then at some point EPA says, sort of changed their mind and decided it wasn't such a good idea and asked them to switch, and at that point I think BP pretty much just ignored them. And by that point we're already looking at 800,000 gallons up to 1 million gallons of dispersants. The scale of this is so huge, it has never happened before. We have no idea what the effect of putting 1 million gallons of these dispersants out there in the environment is going to be. We know it has an immediate acute effect, but the sheer magnitude of what we've done here is just, there are too many unknowns right now.
My name is Michael Allen from Pensacola. My question is similar, and by the way, thank you all for being here. Dr. Snyder, is there any, do you know of any data about the toxicity of the dispersant when it arrives here in Pensacola? Is there any set of chemistry that you're looking for when you're doing your water quality tests that is relevant to COVID?
We don't know if dispersants are going to get here. We don't know how fast they're breaking down. We assume that the dispersants are facilitating the dissolving of the oil in the water, which is one reason why we want to look for dissolved oil. There is not a standard test for these dispersants. Any of the commercial labs, our lab, we talked about setting one up, but I'm way short-handed and way underfunded, and we're scrambling just to do what we're doing to look for dissolved hydrocarbons. We have a chemist who's actually volunteering his time. He says that he can do this, but it's just a matter of, you know, him, whether we pull him away from doing hydrocarbon analysis and have him work on working up a dispersant analysis that doesn't exist yet. We can't afford that right now. We're assuming that the dispersants are going to be associated with dissolved oil, but we don't know how fast they're going to break down. We don't know if they're going to be here. We're more concerned about looking for the dissolved oil at this point.
Is there any plan on making a change to that? I have a lot of friends. I'm concerned about it myself. We're afraid to swim. And we have so many friends that are just crazy with fear about dispersants and poisoning the Gulf. And they're afraid that the water is ruined for our lifetime, maybe longer. This is something that seems to be pretty important.
The one thing that you can be assured of is that the material is biodegradable. It will not stick around forever. It isn't like PCBs in Escambia Bay that are going to be here for eternity. The oil itself and the dispersants are both biodegradable products. The question is, what happens when we use them on such a large scale? The sheer volume of the stuff that we put out there is really the question. We do know that eventually it will all break down and won't be with us forever.
Had several people call me today asking about this. Apparently reports are going around right now about sea turtles being burned while they're doing the skimming out in, I'm assuming Louisiana, because we're not doing any burning here in Florida. But when they're collecting the oil with the skimmers, that they're collecting sea turtles, and that when they are burning it, they're not taking the time to make sure and remove any of the turtles out of there. So people would like to know what assurances can there be that this will not be happening here in Florida and also in Louisiana as well.
Okay, but yes, burning was one process by which they were eliminating the oil. During the early process, I'm not sure that there were any turtle observers there. I do know at this time that NOAA has turtle observers that will be at the site of the burning offshore there at the spill site.
Number 3? Do we have a number 3? Auction.
I think my question is basically the same that I asked before. You had mentioned, Dr. Snyder, about taking the samples, looking for the dissolved oil on Mondays and Thursdays, and then getting the information out. Where would we go to get this information?
What was the question? The question was,
how's the
samples
information?
that we're taking the water out on the beach, where is that information available? We are sending information to Escambia County, Santa Rosa County, and Okaloosa County. The Emergency Operations Center will have it. Health Department will have it, although it has to go to Tallahassee first for the Health Department to work on it. Escambia County Emergency Operations Center should have it. Also, I sent it to WSRE, and when we had the hit on radio, they announced that. And also to the news term, sent it to them.
Okay, thank you.
Number 4?
Howard Miller, and my question's for Mr. Rice. Could you please explain the wildlife capture or rescue and cleanup process?
The process that we go through, and I think it's real important to have a
full process for documentation purposes and determine definitely what BP's responsible for, and they follow through in contributing to the damages that occur. So the process that we go through is, there are several things under my responsibility. The main purpose of my job is to minimize impact to wildlife and resources in this three-state area. And as far as the one is the rehab facilities, we set up 3 rehab facilities, one in Gulfport, Mississippi, one in Theodore, Alabama, and one here in Pensacola, Florida. We also have a stabilization facility in Panama City. The way the process is we use a 1-866 hotline that we go through. And we have instructed folks, if you find a bird that's in need of rescuing or a dead carcass, to report it to the wildlife hotline. Once it goes to the wildlife hotline, the goal that I had from day one, which is a difficult goal, and we have not met it all the time, I'll admit to that, was a 1.5 hour period of time from the time the call goes into the hotline, which was in Houston, Texas, to the time that we have people on the ground and at that location to collect that bird and get it to the wildlife rehab facility. What we do is, if it's a bird, someone will respond to the call, capture the bird, take it to the rehab facility. At that time, the bird is at the rehab facility. It's stabilized. It could be anywhere from 24 to 48 hours where this bird is stressed and all, maybe dehydrated, whatever, before they begin a washing process. The bird survives, and generally they hold them for several weeks before they're rehabilitated, then it's released. We have documentation from the place that it's captured to the final extent of it. If it's a carcass, the same thing. All carcasses that have been collected from the beginning of the spill are brought there and documented. So that's the process that we have for rehabilitation. So we have the response phase where we have teams up and down the coast that respond to these calls. We have right now around 20 teams. As we expand east, we're expanding and doubling that number. We've had some periods of time where the birds were not captured because of poor information that was received at the hotline, or some problems with obtaining the information from the Houston call center getting to us. So there have been some periods where their birds were not. So we have good reports and some poor reports. And we're constantly refining that, and we're moving the teams to where the impacts occur.
I'm glad to hear that. I had heard some rumors that there was rather a slow response. I also was unaware that we had a Pensacola rehab center. I had been told that some of the birds were being transported all the way back to Mobile.
Well, the way the situation occurs sometimes is where the birds occur, and if it's on the border area, if you're right at some of those areas that could go either way, we'll get them to whichever rehab facility we can. I can't guarantee you that every single bird that was just on the other side of the Florida line went strictly to Pensacola. We'll try to get it to the closest place possible. And we have some of I'll tell you right now, we have the best oil spill rehabilitators in the nation here.
You specifically talked about birds. Are you also rehabbing mammals and
Mammals are being rehabilitated. I'm responsible for the sector Mobile, and the way the mammals and turtles are being rehabbed is through the Marine Mammal Stranding Network. To keep people out of the home office, and they contact the Stranding Network, and they have a very similar process. They have people lined up all along the Gulf Coast and going all the way down to Miami and all that area. and those are the people that also do the turtle nesting and all that. They will respond to all carcasses or live affected mammals and turtles. And it's pretty much the same process. All carcasses are collected and taken back. And so you can imagine how many reefer trucks we have that are full of carcasses at this time. And they're going through and individually doing necropsies on all these animals as we speak. To date, we don't have large numbers of impacted turtles or dolphins, but that's not to say that it may increase at a later date once they start doing some of the tissue analyses and things. That takes several weeks.
Well, thank you for the work that you're doing.
Question from the audience. Is it known what level of dissolved oil or specific compounds is safe or unsafe?
Dr. Lanza still here? That's really a human health issue.
Okay.
I'm not a human health person.
Okay.
Whoever gave you this, if you could write your information at the bottom, we'll get you that answer.
There is known oil has been around for a long time. We know a lot about oil, and we know what the toxicity of the different compounds in oil are for both humans and animals. I just don't have that for humans in my head, but those answers can be found.
Number 5.
Hello. My questions have kind of some varying things. I'm saying questions because I can't get it down to just one.
Get closer to the mic.
Sorry. I can't get just one question for you, so I hope if I kind of veer off into 3 or 4 things, we can see where we go with it. First of all, on the dispersant and the oil, do we have any data about the killing level it does to the seafloor? I mean, if we're talking from the seafloor up, are we losing the entire food chain up? Yes. No? Do we know?
I'll talk just a little bit on it. Why I really want to emphasize our documentation process and all that we have. I worked prior to retiring. I worked on the natural resource damage assessment process, and this is what happens after the fact. And what goes in, I'm on the response phase, but the natural resource damage assessment utilizes the data that we have to assess the injury afterwards. So this may go on for, or I guarantee you this will go on for quite some time. If we don't get good data as we go through this process, they won't have the kind of data. So there's been a lot of work being done through the natural resource damage assessment process. It's pre-assessment, finding out what happened before the oil hit the beaches, what kind of population you have, all of these type of things. And you know, granted, I'm not the expert on this person. He's on the other end of the table. But I can assure you that they will seek the best knowledge they can get wherever it is, through universities and researchers and all, to determine what impact it has on benthic communities, on the birds, turtles, the plankton, all of these type of things. And once those assessments are made, and there's a lot of back and forth negotiating and all this, and splitting of samples and all kinds of different things that go on, determinations are made. And so to get the best science we get, we try to do that now so that we can get a good, fair assessment and recover the damage that occurs. And there's lost natural resource damages. There's also lost recreational use that occurs through this process. So do we have the answers? Do we know? We don't have them now. We're not going to know for a while. But as long as we have the data and documentation, we can keep
keep on going through this process and get to a final conclusion.
And it just seems like if we don't take care of the things from the small level up, when it finally gets to the human level, then we go all the way to our stress management and all those things. If we take care of it from the bottom up, we wouldn't need that. Anyway, the next...
To your dispersant question.
Yes.
There actually is quite a bit of information, quite a bit of studies that have been done on toxicity of the dispersants, especially the two that are being used most widely now. One of the issues I think is the public generally doesn't know much about this area of research. And the other issue is that the company that makes the two dispersants, corrects the dispersants that are being used, was reluctant to release the formulation because of the trade secret issue. Now, but what we should remember is that the dispersant has been shown to break down actually quite rapidly in the system. The real issue, and the dispersants are used very widespread in lots of smaller spills all across the country. The idea is to keep petroleum out of sensitive habitats where it could float to. And Dr. Snyder alluded to this earlier when he talked about you want it to float over reefs, but you don't want it to float into marshes and issues like that. So that's important to remember. So this isn't some brand new thing that they're just throwing into the ocean, trying to see if it might, be a better solution. The other part of that is the dispersants have never been used to this volume, and that's the real concern, because any innocuous solution, you put in 1 million gallons of it into a system and it can become toxic. And so that's really the concern, is the massive volume that's been used, not the dispersant necessarily in a more dilute fashion, but just the volumes that have been used. That's the real concern.
Then the other part of my question with that is to do more directly with the wildlife. Is it actually a true piece of information that I got that only 3% of the birds that are rehabilitated actually survive, or that are taken through the process of cleaning?
Did you say 3%?
3%.
I know the percentage is much higher than that as far as the survival rate of those that go through the process.
Okay.
I think it's much higher than that, but I couldn't give you an exact number. It depends, of course, on the species and the level of health of the bird when it's received. And that's why it's important to us from a timely standpoint of receiving that bird and getting it back to the rehab facility.
So if I'm out in Navarre, are we still thinking a half hour is reasonable, or is there anything we should do? If I saw an animal in distress and I know I've got a half an hour to stand there and watch this, is there something I can do to help, or can I not?
Yeah, that's a great question. And part of the reason I put the goal at a half an hour is the average person probably, if they're good enough to call and call about this bird, they probably will stay with that bird about a half an hour and spend their time being with this bird. And that's very helpful to these responders. And generally what will happen is once we receive the call, we've got the contact information and call the person back and say, we're in response, we're so far away and all, could you please stay with that bird? If a person's with the crowd around and everything, this bird is already stressed. And we would emphasize to the folks that made the call, would you please have people keep a distance from it, let the bird relax as much as it can. The less you stress that bird, the better we have success in rehabilitating that bird. It's in the evening, generally the success level is somewhat better, it's cooler, birds less stressed and all. Middle part of the day and warm conditions, all of those kind of things can have an effect.
Sure. Well, thank you.
Number 6.
I kind of have questions for all three of you. They're a little bit of spin-offs of what we've already talked about. But first I'd like to know where we can find the actual data on the quantity and the condition of the wildlife that were collected. Is there a good source for us to look at for that?
There is, it's on a website. I don't have that particular website, but I believe it's on the table. Is it not, Matt?
Is it through the Fish and Wildlife Service or?
It's at the Deepwater Response.
We will say right now quickly too that any link that you heard tonight, we will get it together. We will get them all on the Florida Sea Grant website, and then also from there onto the county website, onto the Escambia County Extension website, the Santa Rosa County. We'll get them on all the websites you know of, and you'll also have all of our email contacts. The ones right at the bottom where it says Extension Personnel, Andrew Diller, Christopher Lindy, and Carrie Stevenson. Email us if you don't find that link, and we will send it directly to you tomorrow if we can.
My next question is for Dr. Snyder. What did you learn when you got your actual oil comparison sample from the Deepwater Horizon rig, or were you able to obtain that to compare your data to?
Could you repeat that?
Your original, your comparison sample?
Yes.
Did you actually get to receive that from the Deepwater Horizon rig?
That's an interesting story. There are millions of gallons of oil floating out there, and for a long time nobody would send us any official samples.
That's what I was worried about.
And I was contacted by a ship captain running a supply ship out to rigs out of Venice, Louisiana, lives in Alabama, who since has quit his job because his boat got sprayed with dispersants, and he did not want to take his crew back out there, and he quit his job. He's now unemployed, no health insurance, living in Alabama. But while he was still employed, he called me and said that he had a logbook with notes that he'd taken from the beginning of the incident and wondered if anybody wanted that information. And I asked him if he could get me a sample of oil. He said, yeah, it's all over the place. So I drove to Venice, Louisiana to meet him on a Sunday at midnight to get a sample of oil. I felt like I was doing a drug deal or something. You know, this oil illegally from this guy. His company knew about it. It was all fine. But I could not get officially a sample of the oil to set up our analytical lab. I had to go drive 5 hours to Venice, Louisiana to get it and bring it back. But yeah, we've had that sample, and I've since shared that sample with other scientists across the state of Florida who also can't get samples of oil. I still don't have a sample of the original raw material that's coming out of the pipe. We used J. Florida crude, which is very similar from oil in J. Florida. So there has been issues. It's not just BP that's been the problem. Our government agencies have not been as helpful as they could have been. And really one of the frustrating things being an academic scientist is how much we have been frozen out and kept to the sidelines. And that frustration is shared all across the state of Florida and all over the Gulf Coast for a lot of academic scientists.
So is it even possible for you right now to kind of monitor how the biodegradation process is even going? How much is it reducing its toxicity by the time it gets here?
There are people now working on degradation rates of it. We tried to get funding to do that early on, and everybody was concerned about shutting the well off, which they should have been. But really, to determine the full extent of where this is going to go, we need to know what the loss rates are, and one of the big loss rates is the biodegradation rate by bacteria. And that's still a huge unknown. We don't really have those figures yet, but people are working on that now.
Thank you. That kind of leads right into my question for Dr. Patterson. What do you know about the long-term potential effects of this?
Well, we have a couple of examples of large-scale spills that there's some information that we can glean from. The example in the Gulf in the 70s was Ixtoc, which was the largest on record. Unfortunately, there aren't a whole lot of data. There were a couple of expeditions from NOAA ships and other federal agencies that went down to Mexican waters to try to collect information and to assess long-term issues. We do have some information along the Texas coastline where there were impacts. And then, of course, we have the Valdez example in Prince William Sound. One of the issues with the Prince William Sound example is there are different types of crude. The second issue is that that's an enclosed system, high latitude, cold water, so the seasonal cycles of productivity and potential for biodegradation are much different than what we have here. So we have a very large volume, but most of our information comes from an entirely different system. And so the the end answer is we don't really know. We have some information based on the life history of organisms and smaller scale studies where we can predict what the acute effects might be given toxicity of the petroleum products in the surface layers, the plankton. There tends to be a synergistic, an additive or even multiplicative effect of ultraviolet radiation and the hydrocarbons that are present. And so one big concern that's been voiced, and rightly so, is larval fishes and larval invertebrates that are spawning throughout the summer have been exposed to this in areas for some species that are very important spawning grounds. Bluefin tuna has been mentioned, the red snapper. Most of the grouper species have wrapped up spawning. They typically spawn in winter into early spring. And so year class failure for those species is very real. I think longer term, the chronic effects in the system are the persistence of the hydrocarbons. Again, Prince William Sound, there are lots of issues of long-term persistence of hydrocarbons, but there you have rocky shorelines where pools of oil would exist beneath rocks, places where steam cleaned. Now we know that was a bad idea there because it looked pretty from a distance, but then you pick up a rock and it's got oil underneath. So the bacteria themselves, they work best when they have high contact rate, tight surface area, and water and oxygen and nutrients. So under rocks in Prince William Sound is not a good place, especially in cold environments for bacteria metabolism ability to be ramped up. And that's really one of the reasons, the dispersant really serves a couple of purposes. One is to break up the petroleum to keep it away from the surface so we don't have contamination of marshes. And the second is that by emulsifying the oil, it makes it somewhat soluble, and it also makes the particle sizes much smaller, so theoretically the bacteria could have a better shot at breaking it down and speed up the process. And actually Joe Lipo at UWF did a lot of research on that after about these, but like Dr. Snyder mentioned, it came, the fad of that research waned and people weren't as interested. So the acute effects, we have some idea about the long-term chronic effects in this system. We have some idea of sensitive habitats to look for. Clearly the marshes in Louisiana are heavily impacted now. Deep water reef systems are very fragile ecosystems. That's where my research has been focused, trying to get ideas of what habitats and communities look like beforehand, and now we're starting to revisit those sites. So some of those things, this is a unique event, at least with our capabilities to observe and to test. So there will likely be some chronic effects in the system, but the scale of those and how long-term, we don't know.
If this oil isn't dispersed properly, how far could you think, in your opinion, could it actually reach around the coastlines?
Well, there's a natural weathering process that occurs in the petroleum, and the Ixtoc example is an interesting one. We've talked to several scientists. Wes Hummel at the Hart Institute at Texas A&M Corpus Christi has done a lot of research in reefs in southern Gulf of Mexico, and he was involved in some of the work trying to assess habitat effects in the early 70s when Ixtoc sunk and had the well blowout. And he indicated that all the oceanographic models were predicting a flow toward the Florida Straits, and they sent an oceanographic vessel down to examine, put drifters in and examine where the flow of oil was. And there was a tropical system, and that's when it blew all the oil back toward Texas. Earlier in this event, people were predicting that the oil was going to get into the loop current and was going to be in Miami in a week. But we know that the loop current is a very dynamic system, and an eddy pinched off and it trained whatever oil was there at the surface. It turns out that oceanographic samples since then, a lot of the sheen that was observed at the surface turns out to be a type of phytoplankton called cyanobacteria. And so these are bacteria which are photosynthetic, and they're able to take inorganic nitrogen and turn it into organic nitrogen, so they can self-fertilize basically. And they occur in large concentrations out in the open ocean, and it turns out that a large part of that was actually just cyanobacteria. So, if we could predict currents and systems and weather, then we could do lots of things better than we currently do. And so long term, that really comes down to an atmospheric and oceanographic question. And our ability to predict, it's like hurricanes, 2 days out, we can predict with some amount of precision where the storm might be in 2 days, a week, a month, not likely.
Thank you very much.
We've got time for about 2 more questions, so we'll take those, and then if we don't get to your question, please do write it down, and we'll get that answer for you.
If you gave me a sheet, we're probably not going to get to them. If you didn't write your contact info, please get my attention. We're at number 8.
This is a wildlife question. You're talking about trying to rehabilitate animals, birds that have been affected by the oil. I am concerned that we are facing the extinction of certain species in the Gulf. Is there any attempt to gather the species and protect them before they are affected?
Thanks for that question, because another important part is I had concerns from the very beginning as to the response and the impact that it could have on certain species. And so what we have done thus far is from the endangered species standpoint, manatees. We knew there were sightings in Mobile Bay, and so we worked with the contractors to avoid contact with these manatees. When you have 4,000 vessels of opportunity that they send out to assist in this, and a lot of these people might not be familiar with those particular waters, you're going to have some type of collision if you're not careful. So we instructed all the contractors to do all that. We had the Alabama beach mouse and accessibility over the dunes to get to working on the beaches. Of course, the turtle issue. We have turtles nesting this time of year, all of them coming ashore. You've got beach machines, you've got 400 people walking the beaches and all the support vehicles, everything else. So what we have done is have beach monitors that walk in front of this equipment at night. A lot of them cleanup has gone mechanical now, because in some ways it's less intrusive than 400 people marching all over the beach with ATVs and dump trucks and other heavy equipment and things, because this oil is a product that doesn't congeal until it turns cooler at night, and that's when the machines work. Well, that's also the time that the turtles come ashore to nest. So we're trying to minimize the impact, get the oil cleaned up off the beaches with the least impact so these turtles can nest. But getting to your question, what the decision has been made on the turtle nesting is, since we feel like this is going to be a long-term situation where you're going to have re-oiling the beaches and everything, when we identify these turtle nests that are marked and identified, and then the eggs will eventually be removed and taken on the eastern side of Florida after imprinting from the sand and then released. So that these young turtles, once they nest, they don't have to go through possible oiling on the beach, through all machinery or anything else, so that they can safely get to the water's edge.
Number 9? Actually, that was my question, was whether there was any plan to harvest as they hatch, so we touched on it. Thank you.
Number 10? 11? 12?
My name is Sonia Merritt, and my question is, were any studies done after the oil spill 33 years ago that left the mouth of Bayou Chico and went around to the mouth of Bayou Grande? Any studies to see what happened long term? So I was wondering, that way we'd have a reference to see what might happen in the bios, because it was about a half a tanker that flowed out.
I'm not familiar with that particular spill, but I do know for sure there was probably not near as much done prior to what's called Oil Pollution Act of 1990 from the Exxon Valdez. So it was prior to that.
Because it looked a lot like what I saw on the beach today when I cleaned it up. We dug it up and took out White Island.
What I think is important to think about in the context of that question is, you're saying 33 years ago there was a significant spill here, and you would be hard pressed to find evidence of that spill today. So we live in an area where we have a subtropical climate, we have a highly productive ecosystem here, and biological systems tend to be very resilient. So oil is messy, it's ugly, but it's biodegradable. Dr. Snyder touched on this. Bacteria break it down over time. And so as bad as things look right now, we should just all remember that the system is resilient, and it may not be what it looked like 2 months ago, a year from now, or 2 years from now, but the system is resilient and the oil is biodegradable.
Just also to add a perspective, I've talked to a few people that it reminded me during World War II there were a lot of ships that were sunk, a lot of those were oil tankers, and there was oil over a lot of our beaches here and all around the world. We really don't see much of that evidence persisting today either. But there's a bigger issue here that is more difficult to get a handle on, and it's not quantifiable, but it's a general subtle degradation of the environment that occurs every time something like this happens, and we lose a little bit, and this time we're losing a lot. And yeah, it'll bounce back, but will it bounce back to where it was? I don't know. I can't promise that. And you know, you look at the industrial values here, and certainly they've taken hits repeatedly over the years, and it's not the same as Big Lagoon State Park in Bio Chico, right? It's this cumulative effect of impacts that occur, and it's very, very difficult to quantify.
Yeah, and so really that speaks to what the resistance in the system is to perturbation, to some bad thing happening. And we see that in lots of systems around here where they are stressed. And a lot of the stresses are human caused, you know, anthropogenic. In the fishes, you know, I've had lots of questions about the fishes offshore and what effect this might have. One thing that we need to think about is that most of the large economically valuable fishes that we have are either fully exploited or overfished. Many species like red snapper, gag, grouper can live decades, yet most of the fish in the population are less than 5 or 6 years old. We have management in place now to recover those populations, but bluefin tuna last winter was almost listed under an international convention to prohibit trade in endangered species. So we have many species, in this case we're talking about fish, which are, most of the resiliency that they have or resistance to these types of pressures has been consumed. We've fished them down to low levels. And so while their biology may allow for this, we've affected their population structure to the point where this scale of an event could have really catastrophic effects. But again, there is that resiliency in the system. Will it recover to where it was? We'll have to see.
Well, the state asked us, I work on billfish boats, how long we could last. Well, the question I had was how long before the billfish return? Like marlin and white marlin, you know, the blue marlin and such. How long?
I don't know. One of the big concerns off the continental shelf now and in the outer shelf is sargassum, which is an algae that floats on the surface we see here on our beaches. It's a very important habitat for juvenile species that settle out of that and either become pelagic fish like marlins and sailfishes, or they become reef fish like triggerfish and amberjack. And so that's a big concern. There's some folks at the Gulf Coast Research Lab in Mississippi, as well as some folks at Dolphin Island, who are looking at those issues with sargassum. But sargassum, and I saw a statement in a newspaper article saying that the oil spill could wipe out sargassum in the North Atlantic, and I just don't see how that's possible. I think that's hyperbole, and we should really kind of pull back from that type of exaggeration. But sargassum is an algae, and it has incredibly high production rates, and it can ramp up its populations very quickly. So if you're going to look at a resilient organism, that would be a resilient organism. And that whole ecosystem that's associated with sargassum, will benefit once sargassum starts to recover.
All right, I know we have a lot of other questions that would like to be answered, but unfortunately we are out of time for the evening. We do encourage you again, if you have a question that has not been answered, to get one of the orange cards here and write it down, get your contact information on there. We will return a call or an email to you with the answers that you are looking for. We'd like to thank all our panelists, especially our second panel, as well as thank the City of Pensacola for letting us use this beautiful new facility. There are a couple of questions that were written down that people did not put their contact information on. We didn't get to those, so if you would see Brooke back there, she has your questions, we can fill those back in. And again, your local extension offices, myself, I'm Andrew Diller, I'm on the bottom of that sheet, Carrie Stevenson, and Christopher Lindy, we are all one-stop source for some of these answers. Go ahead and email us, call us, and we will track down answers for you guys on these things. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for your questions. Lots of information over there.
Oh yes, there's lots of handouts over